In the mid-19th century, the waters of Lake Michigan played host to a story stranger than fiction, one that involved a self-proclaimed monarch, an island kingdom, and for a brief period, even pirates. At the center of this tale is James Jesse Strang, an American religious leader who declared himself the rightful successor to Joseph Smith, the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are following Strang on his remarkable journey from a small-town lawyer to the Mormon Pirate King of Lake Michigan. Raise your Jolly Rogers high and hit that subscribe button and let's set sail on the high seas, or Lake Michigan in this case, for a special episode of This House. In 1813, James Jesse Strang was born in Scipio, New York. A bright and ambitious young man, having completed a total of 6 months in school, Strang dabbled in various professions, including law, education, and journalism. His life took a dramatic turn in 1844 when he converted to Mormonism, quickly rising to prominence within the church. Though he had only been a church member for about 3 months when Joseph Smith was assassinated, Strang produced a letter which he claimed was signed by Smith, appointing him to become the new leader of the Mormons. Almost the entire clergy noted that the letter was obviously forged and did not match Smith's writing style nor penmanship, but Strang took it a step further and told the congregation that an angel told him it was real. Strang's claims were met with skepticism by many, including Brigham Young, who was also vying for leadership. But with a self-reported angel's endorsement, Strang was able to convince 12,000 Mormons that he was Smith's rightful replacement. He established a community in Voree, Wisconsin, where he unearthed the so-called Voree plates, similar to the plates that Joseph Smith claimed to have found. These secret, ancient plates helped bolster his leadership credentials among his followers, giving them more reasons to believe in him as their leader. Something that would set his sect of Mormonism apart from the main church was his strong belief in monogamy, in a time when many Mormons were already skeptical of embracing polygamy. In 1848, Strang and his followers relocated to Beaver Island in Lake Michigan. Here, Strang declared himself the king of his religious community, marking one of the only instances in U.S. history where a functional monarchy existed within its borders. On July 8th of 1850, at his house on Beaver Island, Strang was crowned king in a grand ceremony, complete with a red robe, a tin crown, and a wooden scepter. His reign, however, was far from peaceful. Strang's rule over Beaver Island was characterized by strict religious and social codes. He enforced tithes, banned alcohol, and imposed unique sartorial regulations such as requiring women to wear bloomers. Furthermore, he imposed a Gentile tax which forced non-Mormon residents of Beaver Island to either pay the church, convert, leave the island, or face imprisonment. Those who resisted his decrees faced harsh punishments, including flogging and even death. These authoritarian measures fueled resentment among non-Mormon residents, particularly the established community of Irish-American fishermen, leading to several violent confrontations, including the so-called War of Whiskey Point. To establish dominance over the waters between Beaver Island and Mackinac Island, Strang commanded his ships to fire cannons at non-Mormon fishing vessels. Beyond his strict governance, Strang's followers were notorious for their aggressive tactics against non-Mormons. The Strangites, as they were known, engaged in activities that bordered on piracy. They were accused of plundering neighboring towns and ships, adding to Strang's infamous reputation as the Mormon Pirate King. His men would raid ports around Lake Michigan, not only for supplies and spoils, but to convince shipping companies to only use his Mormon ports as they were the only ones where safety could be guaranteed, bridging the gap between pirates and mob activity. Strang's audacity reached a peak when he used his political influence to secure a seat in the Michigan House of Representatives. Despite his controversial background, Strang proved to be an effective legislator, championing issues such as temperance and the organization of new counties. His political career, however, did little to quell the animosity between his followers and the local populace. Around this time, he began to backtrack on his earlier claims about monogamy and welcome polygamy into his community. People were fleeing by the hundreds to escape his authoritarian rule, and Strang claimed that there weren't enough decent men left for women to marry, so he opened up his citizens' marriages to allow single women to choose their husbands. He thought that 3 wives was an acceptable number, not nearly as outrageous as the 50-some-odd wives that Brigham Young would go on to have. Nevertheless, Strang himself married 5 women, but had 2 of them disguise themselves as male family members so as to not draw criticism from his congregation. This transition from monogamy to polygamy drove away thousands more from his kingdom, as it went against the very reason they chose to follow Strang in the first place. Having made so many enemies and upset his core followers, it's no surprise that his reign came to a violent end. On June 16th of 1856, he was ambushed and shot by 2 disgruntled former followers, Thomas Bedford and Alexander Wentworth. The attack happened in full view of officers from the USS Michigan who did nothing to intervene, having been targeted by Strang previously. He was gravely injured and died from his wounds on July 9th of 1856, bringing to an end his kingdom, which lasted exactly 6 years and 1 day. Following his death, a mob from Mackinac Island forcibly expelled the remaining 2,600 Strangites from Beaver Island. The community was scattered and Strang's kingdom was dismantled. The Strangites dispersed across the country, with most eventually joining the less piratey Mormons in Salt Lake City. James Strang's story is a fascinating chapter in the history of the Latter-day Saints movement and in US history. His combination of religious fervor, political ambition, and unorthodox practices set him apart from other Mormon leaders of his time. Today, Strang's legacy lives on in the small Strangite sects that continue to follow his teachings and leadership. From a lawyer in New York to a crowned king on Beaver Island, James Jesse Strang truly was the Mormon Pirate King of Lake Michigan. I know this video was a bit outside of the norm as we focused on the history, and while I wish there were more photos of Strang's house to show you, his story was simply too fascinating not to share. If you like this format of video, let me know down below in the comments section, as there are some really wild stories associated with houses that have very few photos. As always, thank you all for watching, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.